Hey guys, 47 Driver here again, back with another video. This time we're going to talk about flying this beast around in DCS, some techniques and procedures and things like that. A lot of you guys have been asking for it, and figured I'd do kind of a quick overview of different flight profiles and some techniques surrounding that stuff. I want to thank all of you for your support. 2,000 subscribers in just a couple days. This is really awesome. The amount of views has been just incredible. The comments have all been very positive, very nice. Feedback's been awesome, and it really means a lot to me that you guys are so interested in this stuff, and also being so nice about everything. I know I'm not very good at recording and editing videos. I really don't edit at all, and a lot of this stuff is it's just not. It doesn't come very easily to me, so I appreciate all the constructive criticism, the feedback, and really the positivity. It's been very nice to see. So yeah, let's get right into it. Hopping in the cockpit here. I'm going to do a very quick run up to show you guys kind of how fast you can start this thing. I'm going to try to make sure everything's in screen so you can kind of follow along with what I'm doing, and I'll talk along with each step here. So I'm going to make it nice and quick. I'm going to go up to the electrical panel here, battery on, APU run for 5 seconds. Start for 2 or a little bit longer, doesn't really matter as long as it's at least 2. Radio lights on, gen switch on. Acknowledge your cautions, clear your wiki page. It's bad practice to leave everything unacknowledged in an aircraft. Alright, backup power on the FADEC is on. Wait for our our warnings and our FADEC cautions to clear. Make sure you're running your ICAS so you can monitor the engine start. Everything is clear. Number 1 ECL to ground. Left mains, cross feed. Up there. 1 clear to start. Grab the start switch, bring it to the number 1 side, watch your NG, hold that switch until 12%. 12% released. PTIT comes up, pressure's above 5, wait for this to stabilize above 50%. Okay, NG is stable, PTIT is normal, pressure's above 5. Number 2 goes to ground. Make sure it's in the detent. 2 clear to start. Hold the start switch to the number 2 side until 12% NG. Released. Watching your NG. PTIT comes up. Pressure's above 5. Wait for that to stabilize above 50%. Okay, 1 and 2 are stable in ground. Bring 1 and 2 to flight. Doesn't really matter how fast you go in the sim. They're in flight. Watch your ICAS page freak out as everything goes way really high and then comes back down. That's fine. Okay, time for the gen swap. Main generator 1 is on, 2 is on, APU is off, generator is off, and then APU is off. All fuel pump switches come on. Crossfeed is closed, and Eagle Dynamics is aware of the bug where only your main tanks pump fuel right now. Hopefully that's fixed soon, because you're missing out on a lot of gas by not having those aux tanks. And that's pretty much it. You're now up at 100% very quickly. Alright, so with that, what we're going to do is quickly just configure the aircraft how I would want it, using some of those tips that I gave you guys in the navigation video. So HSD, map, decenter, overlay, flight plan, nav symbology, range rings. On the outboard I go overlay, flight plan, nav symbology. That's how I like to run it, but you guys can do whatever you want, and in the future this is way more customizable when they add the rest of the features. A lot of you guys have asked about ADF. I've said in a couple comments, I don't use that. It's not really in the fleet anymore. I haven't used it in a couple years. It's pretty straightforward. I'll have to mess with it. I don't know that it's modeled yet. And I've had a couple of you ask about comms and radios. Once again, it's just not modeled yet. I've said it in a couple comments, but the mission page, which is very customizable, is generally where I'm going to run the CDU because I can interact with all my radios and whatever else I want to be displayed on here I can use. CNI page, comms, navigation, and IFF is another place you can interact with all those radios as well. But once again, not modeled. It's just, right now, it's just the backup control head for the ARC 186 radio, which a lot of other aircraft in DCS use. So I think you guys can figure that out. And it's also, as far as I'm aware right now, at least, it's not functioning in SRS. I messed around with it a little bit and I can't figure it out. For those of you, I'm just going to address a couple things real quick that a lot of comments have talked about. If you guys are hearing any sort of weird beeping tones in your ear that you can't get to go away, that's probably a VOR or an outer marker, depending on if you have anything tuned up in the CDU. But these pins here on the bottom of the cap are going to control the volumes for that. If you just pull them, then you won't hear that anymore. You can see if I highlight, this is the VOR and ILS volume. You got the TACAN, ADF, and the marker beacon stuff. You can just pull those and that's fine. That should get rid of your issues there. So all I'm going to do for my current position is pick up to a hover. We're going to talk about some hovering. We're going to go fly around, talk about cruise flight stuff, talk about some known issues and some feedback that you guys have had, and then we'll do some landings and talk about that. So I'm not going to forget the AFCS this time. We're going to turn that to both. I'm going to leave the park and brake set. I'm going to leave the swivel switch locked because I'm not going to ground taxi. So we're going to come straight up. And a lot of you have talked about, I've seen it on the forums, I've seen it on various Discord channels and whatnot, that the aircraft feels kind of like a rocket ship or a hot air balloon coming off the ground if you just pull a bunch of power. And I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. It may sound a little far-fetched, but that is not necessarily inaccurate. We're talking 10,000 shaft horsepower here. No tail rotor means no drivetrain loss of power to power a tail rotor for anti-torque purposes. And you're talking 6 350-pound rotor blades generating a whole lot of lift. This thing, when it's empty, absolutely is a rocket ship, and coming off the ground with a bunch of thrust in your arm, you can absolutely see as high as 2,000, even higher than that, feet per minute rate of climb in the vertical. So yeah, I don't think that's necessarily inaccurate. I know I have some issues with the flight model, and it's mostly just because stuff is not implemented yet, and I am giving Eagle Dynamics plenty of grace for that. I know early access is pretty controversial, but I'm personally okay with it. Like I said, I've been using DCS and had a lot of fun with this sim over probably the past 12 years or so, maybe longer. So, all right, we're at a hover. I'm going to come out to the runway. We're going to talk about a couple of hovering turns in the 47 because tandem rotors are pretty cool in the way that they can turn via the yaw axis at a hover. So I'm just going to keep my altitude low, just kind of hover taxi in and get over the runway here. All right. So we'll get her locked up in a kind of a stable hover, and then we'll talk about yawing the aircraft. So at a stable hover, if you just feed in pedal, you're going to do what's called turning about the center hook, or turning about the center of the aircraft. And that is just a very stable turn, keeping kind of the center of the aircraft over a point. It's very straightforward. That's how most helicopters are roughly going to yaw, I would assume. So what else can we do? So you see I gained a little bit of altitude there. When I switched to the external view, I was afraid of crashing, so I pulled in a little bit of power. But you can also turn about the nose. So let's say I want to keep this runway marking, centerline marking in front of the aircraft. I'm going to feed opposite cyclic versus pedal. So I'm doing left pedal, right cyclic, just kind of feeding it in, taking it out as I go, feeding it in, taking it out as I go. And this is very ugly because I'm just not that great at flying helicopters in DCS, if I'm being completely honest. But yeah, so you can turn about the nose, kind of swinging the tail around, but keeping the nose oriented around a central point, which is pretty nice. You can also, I can tell you this is going to be very difficult for me because it's hard in real life, let alone a sim where I can't feel anything and I don't have my friends behind me looking at stuff. You can turn about the tail. So the way you're going to do that is by feeding pedal and cyclic in the same direction. So I'm going to come nose right, tail left. I'm going to just feed in a little bit of right cyclic and take it out as I feed it in and keep the pedal input the same. I can tell you right now I'm probably just flying. So what will happen is if you do a little bit too much of the cyclic, you're going to slide, and you don't want to slide. You want to keep the tail centered over a target instead of sliding around. So you have to be very gentle with the amount of lateral cyclic that you use. I don't know how I was going to look in this. Yeah, I'm just sliding around everywhere. But you guys get the point. If I was a better DCS pilot, then maybe that would have looked cooler. So we're going to nose left tail right this thing and just take off. Feeding that power. All right. And, you know, keep in mind, a lot of you guys, there's been quite a few of you asking me how to perform like a handbrake turn and all this kind of stuff. I don't do that maneuver. It's not something that we do. The really cool, badass brothers overseas in the UK and in Australia, they have Chinooks as well, and their demo teams and their pilots are incredible, and they do stuff like that. It's not something we do, so I kind of get the idea behind it just by watching the maneuver, and you know, sometimes I'll have a little fun and do something maybe that's a little similar in the real aircraft, but I'm not going to go out and do it to the extent that they do it. So I'm not the authority to teach you guys how to do that maneuver. I can kind of show you the fundamentals of what they're doing to achieve it, and we'll talk about that in a minute, I guess. But yeah, I'm not a demo pilot that does all sorts of aerobatic maneuvers and stuff. So flying in cruise flight, it is pretty easy. A lot of people have commented on kind of the pitch transients and the yaw being a little squirrely in cruise. And I completely agree. It's just a lack of modeling for the flight model right now. We just don't have adequate AFCS implementation, including LCTs and Dash. And I know this is a lot of acronyms, and some of you guys are wondering what all this stuff is, and I promise I will explain it in a longer video later on. But just not having that implemented is what's causing this kind of stuff. The real aircraft does not fly like this. So basically what they've modeled, to the best of my knowledge, just based on how this aircraft's flight model behaves in DCS, is they're kind of modeling tandem rotor aerodynamics to a degree. So it does do things for the that a tandem rotor without all the AFCS and things that we have to help us, at least in the CH-47, should do. But it wouldn't do them in the CH-47 if the AFCS was on and everything was working. So keep that in mind. Just give these guys some grace. Be patient. I think they're gonna nail it. I have faith in them. They usually do a really good job on their modules. So I'm cruising along at roughly 110 knots, up to 115 at about 100 feet right now. Generally, I'm looking at about a 5 to 10 degrees nose low attitude in cruise, and that'll give me usually about 110 to 120 knots. Maybe 130, which is pretty comfortable. Turning, so if I just roll left cyclic into this turn, you'll see the nose is going to balloon up, and the aircraft's not really turning very sharp because it's actually kind of slipping in this turn here. So what I need to do is keep the turn coordinated to the best I can using pedals. You're not going to have to do that when this thing is kind of fully modeled in terms of the flight model. It will automatically coordinate turns for you. But right now you're going to have to keep those turns coordinated using pedal, and you're going to have to keep a little bit of forward pressure on the cyclic to not lose airspeed right now. So to give you an example of that, and that goes for regardless of your altitude, you're going to have to do that I know some of you have asked about terrain flight techniques and stuff like that. So getting our speed back at like 115, I'm going to roll the aircraft, feed a little bit of pedal in the same direction, and keep a little bit of forward cyclic pressure just to keep that nose down below the horizon, which will maintain my speed. And that'll be a much prettier turn, and you can really make that as steep as you want. Just keep in mind that this version, at least right now where we are in DCS with the flight model, it's going to be very, very difficult to maintain your speed in a maneuver that is this aggressive, even if you add power. So, which is fine. So, and that's kind of the fundamentals for what that handbrake turn maneuver is that looks so cool, that I don't do. And keep in mind, you're going to see me do things in the simulator that I would never do in the real aircraft, and that I may not have ever been exposed to in the real aircraft, because it's scary and I can die. So I'm sitting in a chair right now at home, and I have no fear of death. So I'm going to do stupid things in this helicopter that I wouldn't normally do. I hope you guys can understand that. So the fundamentals of that handbrake turn is a very aggressive roll followed by pretty aggressive pedal input, keeping that nose dipped very low, and then you're going to have to kind of reduce thrust at the top of that maneuver to not climb. And you can see it kind of accomplished the intent there behind the handbrake style turn, where I'm going from a relatively high rate of speed to a very low rate of speed in the opposite direction very, very quickly. So you guys can play around with that, but it's basically going to be that more aggressive cyclic, more aggressive pedal, and then keep that nose down to not bleed off so much of that speed. If I had done that maneuver without managing my pitch, and I'll show you what that would have looked like, but it's going to be pretty gnarly, and I don't even know, it might kill me. We'll see. Get our speed back here, and I'm going to do the same type of maneuver in this other direction here, and I'm not going to manage my pitch as well. Nose is going to come up, and now I'm going all over the place, ballooned up to the moon, lost all my speed, and I'm now just all over the place. So manage your pitch, keep the nose low in the turn. You're going to have to feed forward cyclic into that turn along with your lateral cyclic and pedal input to keep the aircraft relatively coordinated. So I'm going to come right. We're going to get a little bit of speed. We're going to talk about some approach styles and landing styles and what to avoid, because I know a lot of you have been struggling with settling with power, or VRS, as a lot of you refer to it as in the Chinook so far. So I'm going to get the nose low attitude again to get my speed back, trim the aircraft up so you're not fighting as much spring pressure in your flight controls. I'm going to recenter my head tracker here so you guys can kind of see the VSD. And what I'm going to do is altitude's pretty good. I want to maintain about this speed. I don't want to be going crazy fast. And I'm just going to reduce thrust, right? So I can hold the nose where it is to maintain my speed and enter a rate of descent. If I want to keep that same power setting and pitch the nose up, you can see my rate of descent is going to turn into a rate of climb. So I'm going to have to, as I raise the nose to decel, I'm going to have to lower the thrust to keep my rate of descent. So I'm going to keep my rate of descent nice and shallow. 500 feet per minute or less is going to be pretty desirable. And I'm going to bring this speed down, and we're going to forward and down all the way to the ground. So I'm not going to come to a hover. So I need minimal forward speed. My park and brake is set because I'm on an unimproved surface. There's 10 feet coming down, keeping the speed low, aft gear, forward gear. Neutralize the flight controls by resetting your trim. So make sure your trimmer reset is bound immediately upon touchdown, and take that power out. So you can see I'm going for a bit of a nose high attitude to touch down with the aft gear first. That gives me a little bit of a safety net because I can hold, as we talked about in the two-wheel operations video, if I really, really need to, I can hold that aft gear on the ground and keep the nose off the ground and fix whatever's wrong with my aircraft at the moment. So if I'm in a wonky situation and I don't want to bring that nose down yet, I can just hold what I got right here, give myself a second, and then bring that nose on down, right? So aft gear first is generally going to be desirable, especially when you're doing more tactical combat style approaches. So we're going to pick up, we're going to do another one, maintain maybe a little bit higher rate of speed, a little faster approach this time. So going to nose left, tail right as we come off the takeoff here. And just go out into the wild blue yonder and find a spot to land. So I'm constantly trimming this aircraft or what I want it to do, so I'm not having to hold this flight control input on my wind wing stick and just make myself get all sweaty for no reason. I can hit my trim, reset that cyclic to neutral and my pedals to neutral, and then I'm using much less energy to fly this aircraft because it's kind of holding those flight controls where I had them. So keeping the altitude relatively low. There's about 50 feet, 80 knots. I'm going to initiate a decel, but I don't really want to come down too much yet, so it's going to be a more aggressive decel, managing the thrust to keep my altitude. And as I start to come down in speed, I'm going to have to feed the thrust back in so I don't enter a really high rate of descent. So now I've got my speed looking pretty good, my altitude coming down nice and slow, and I'm going to feed the power in right at the bottom, cushion it, aft gear, forward gear, neutralize flight controls, and take the power out. Alright, so it's all about kind of power management to maintain a profile. You don't want to do too many things at once, because if I'm at 50 feet and I reduce the thrust before I establish a good rate of decel, then I'm going to start descending at 50 feet at 90 knots. When I'm really close to the ground, I need to be slower than that when I touch down. So yeah, keep that in mind. We're going to do kind of a combat takeoff here. So my flight controls are neutralized. I've reset my trim. I'm going to feed the power in, feed the power in, feed the power in. Just a little bit of forward cyclic just to let the nose dip. Feed the power in, a little bit of forward cyclic, a little bit of forward cyclic, and then my power is set. I don't want to climb, so I'm going to keep my nose attitude, keep my power, and I'm going to stay nice and low to the ground with this aggressive nose low attitude to build my speed without having to climb. And then we can do a cyclic climb to trade altitude for airspeed for altitude, so I can leave my power set. You see I'm at 48% dual engine torque on the left side of my VSD right there. I'm coming up through 100 knots, and I'm just going to pitch the nose up, not touching the thrust. I've got a nice rate of climb, almost 2,000 feet per minute. Lost some airspeed and did not touch my thrust until right now when I'm reducing the thrust to level off at this altitude. As you can see, I traded about 40 knots of airspeed for about 350 feet of altitude without changing the power. So when you're really heavy, that kind of maneuver, not so aggressive, can benefit you because you may not have a lot of power available to climb with if you're trying to maintain a relatively high rate of speed. So once again, I'm keeping the nose kind of dipped in this turn as I feed the cyclic and a little bit of pedal in to keep my speed where it is. If I let that nose come up, speed's going to bleed off immediately in those turns. So talking about some more terrain flight stuff, so we'll get a little bit of speed going here. I'm coming up through 90 knots, and I'm just going to handrail this road and show all these AI cars how good of a life I have compared to them. So the same techniques apply for maneuvering at low altitude in this flight model. You need to utilize your pedals to yaw the aircraft into the turn to keep it coordinated. You need to manage pitch and generally, at a low altitude like this, I'm going to fly cyclic more than I'm going to fly thrust. So thrust is going to remain relatively set, and I'm going to manage my altitude more so with cyclic. So if I need to climb, instead of touching the thrust, I'm just going to use the cyclic. And the reason for that is because a cyclic climb versus a regular thrust or power climb is going to be a lot more responsive than waiting for my thrust input to reach the engines and those engines to drive the rotor system. It's not by a lot, but it's by enough that it might save you if you have to get out of a situation or have to climb suddenly. So fly the cyclic versus the thrust at low altitude. Now here I'm just executing those same styles of turns here where I'm managing pitch by making sure my nose stays down so I can maintain my airspeed, and I'm feeding pedal into the turn gradually to swing the tail around coordinate the turn, because this aircraft does not execute coordinated turns at this point in the flight model. And then I can combine some things here. So let's say I have to climb this piece of terrain. I'm going to trade that airspeed for altitude and keep my thrust the same. So bring up on the cyclic. 20 degrees nose high is what I want. I'll come up and over the top, and then I'm going to go ahead and stomp the boot, bring the nose down, come up and over the mountain, and let the thrust out so I can establish a rate of descent and pick some speed back up on the way down. So it's all pretty simple. I know a lot of you have struggled with this flight model, but you have to take care, and it is a little bit of a hands-on experience for now. You have to manage that pitch. It will get away from you even when you're trimmed up. You have to manage that yaw, because it will tend to wobble on you a little bit. You guys can use Bob, the AI co-pilot, map his toggle to something on your stick, and you can utilize him, and he'll maintain nice and very nice coordinated forward flight for you without you having to work so hard to keep the pitch under control. So one last thing I want to talk about is a very specific thing to avoid when trying to land the Chinook. Really, any other helicopter in DCS, you need to avoid this. And this is, I struggled with this for a long time before I had proper flight controls, like a collective and whatnot. It's very difficult for me now that I'm an actual helicopter pilot to fly helicopters with anything other than some sort of collective style grip, as opposed to like a throttle, like a Warthog throttle or whatever. So what you need to avoid is low rate of speed, relatively steep approach with power applied. Okay, so I'm going 15 knots over the ground right now. I'm at 150 feet, and if I let that speed come down even more, right, you can see I'm already descending and I haven't even taken thrust out yet. So what you're going to enter when you get into these situations is settling with power, or VRS, however you want to call it. And if you don't have altitude to recover that, you're going to smack the ground and die, virtually die. So and especially when you have cargo, when you're heavier in the Chinook, I'm totally empty right now, especially when you're heavier, those steep near vertical approaches with very close to zero airspeed or low forward airspeed, where you're coming in really steep and vertical, just kind of straight down on a target like this, you need to avoid those. Or if you're going to do them, they need to be very, very, very slow. You can see right here, my rate of descent is like 200 feet per minute right now. I'm coming down very slow, and that's okay, because you have the ability to recover at a slow rate of descent. Once that rate of descent starts to get away from you, that ground's going to come up very fast. So to avoid that, realize that go-arounds are free, especially in a simulator, right? You're not going to die, and no one's going to make fun of you. So if you're in a nasty-looking approach profile, just stop. If you're not happy with how it looks, then just try it again. So a good approach angle is constant. It needs to be constant, as much as it can be. So pick up a little bit of speed here. I'll just execute a real nice and simple VMC constant approach angle from about 200 feet, and just kind of show you what I mean by constant. So I'm going to come up here, just get a little bit of speed going, and let's start our approach. Okay, so I'm going to start my approach. What I'm going to do is, as I'm increasing the pitch of the nose to bleed off the speed, I'm decreasing power in the thrust lever. Very nice and slow. I'm doing this deliberately very slow, so you guys can see. So my speed is coming off, and my rate of descent is set to about 400 feet per minute. I'm going to maintain that and try and maintain a constant decel to where my speed's not getting away from me too fast. And my rate of descent's increasing, so I'm going to increase thrust to keep it about the same. There it is again. It's right where it should be. Maintaining my decel at about 5 degrees-ish, nose high. Rate of descent's getting a little low, so I'm going to decrease thrust, taking that thrust back up as the rate of descent increases. Everything is very constant, Slow, steady adjustments, steady controls, all the way down, aft gear contact, forward gear contact, flight controls are neutral, power is out. Everything's smooth and controlled, nice and slow. Rate of descent, don't let it get away from you. And even when you're doing those more tactical approaches, like I was showing you earlier, it's the same concept, it's just at a higher, you're just doing everything a little bit faster in terms of the flight control inputs and whatnot. So take off. I'm going to stay low this time. Actually, I'm just to demonstrate it a little better, I'm going to actually come up to get some altitude here. So I want to be around the same speed I was. I'll just pick the speed up even a little more to make it clearer for you. So about 100 feet or so. Let's come up in the speed, maintain our altitude here, and just find a spot. We'll set her down. So it's the same exact concept. So you can see I'm at 150 feet or so. I'm coming up through about 80 knots, and I'm going to initiate an approach. I'm going to look for something a little flatter than that spot right there. Initiate approach, applying those same concepts. So nose pitches up, power comes out at the same time, and establish your rate of descent and establish your decel. At a higher rate of speed, that pitch up effect in the nose is going to require more power reduction to maintain a rate of descent. So I'm keeping everything constant, smooth controlled rate of decel, the speed's coming down, and smooth controlled rate of descent. It's not increasing too much, it's not decreasing too much. Pitch that nose up, I want to be a little slower when I touch down. And then just constant thrust adjustments to control my rate of descent, neutralize the flight controls, and there you go. So that was a little aggressive. It's perfectly fine, you can do that, but apply those same concepts to every style landing that you do, and you'll avoid that VRS or settling with power phenomena that's very prominent in DCS. All right, guys, that's going to be it for today. It's getting this one's going a little long. I talk a lot. Once again, I want to thank you all for the support that you've shown me, the subscriptions, the likes, the comments. Everything's been super cool and very unexpected. I'm not much of a presenter, I can't imagine. I probably sound a little monotone and boring, but you guys seem to like it, so it's very cool. I'm very, very thankful. Comments have all been very positive. I appreciate the constructive criticism where it has come. And yeah, you guys are awesome. So thanks again. And expect some more videos soon. I've got a couple flight engineers and crew chiefs that want to work with me on some content, showing you guys how the calls would sound and doing some maneuvers that I think would be a little easier having a crew member in the back, such as sling loads, stuff like that. And I also have some pilot buddies that want to do some multi-ship kind of missions where you guys can kind of, it's more less of me talking to you and more of us just showing you how we would fly and execute a mission as much as we can show you. So stay tuned for that. That's pretty exciting. I think you guys are going to like that stuff. And once again, thank you all so much. Stay tuned for the next one.